Hello, my name is Dr. R.M. Francis. I'm a poet and writer from the University of Wolverhampton and part of their creative and professional writing team. This is a conference paper that I delivered for the Talking Place Conference and Symposium in September 2022. And I'm re-recording it now for posterity and for anybody who's interested in place writing, the Black Country, and geopoetics. The title of this talk is Terrestrial Astrolabe, and an astrolabe is an ancient wayfinding device, much like a compass, used by seafarers and other travellers to plot their positions in relationship between themselves, the land, and the stars. And in plotting this position between the heavenly and the terrestrial, they place an X on the map, exacting a landscape and a being within that landscape. And in many ways, this is the heart of geopoetics. Geopoetics, if we break the word down, is earth, geo, or ground or soil, and poetics, meaning the process of making or the mechanics of that process. And then we reach geopoetics, earth making. This is the expression of the earth and the connection between the human and the more than human. Much like the astrolabe itself, it concerns itself with bridging the solid, knowable, rational, and the land with the more slippery, ephemeral, and difficult to trace of being. The geopoet Don Mackay called it a crossing point between the poetic or mystical and the scientific or rational. And it's through this bridging that we reconfigure our awareness of the earth and our place in it, and revitalize the connections between the human and the more than human. And these crossing points are between the sciences and mysticism, between rationality and instinct, between biological cognitions and our senses, between being and landscape, body and mind. In essence, this is about establishing different models of meaning making and those expressions. But more than this, it's about re-establishing very ancient wisdoms. In some sense, geopoetics borrows from ancient Eastern religions and philosophies to bring this re-establishment about. The Buddhism of the Shaolin monks and the mysticism of Kundalini yoga, to name two, are huge parts of this. The Shaolin monks, for example, believe that we have body and mind connected, and we have life outside of that. But it's the breath, being both part of and outside of, and the control and manipulation of that breath that starts to play around with what was once perceived as a dichotomy. This too has biological grounding. We now know that the slowing down and the speeding up of breath is capable of changing cognitive and perceptions and those faculties. Breath work is fused with movement too, yoga and qigong. And again, we know that certain types of movement or gesture bring about different mindsets and aid in particular modes of alertness. Breath and movement interact with each other. Taking short, sharp gasps creates a state of alertness, awareness, and preparation, triggering those flight or fight responses. We prepare to move on something. Likewise, when we move quickly or slowly, that changes our breath. So in this light, mind, body, breath, and movement start to formulate their own gestural communicative powers, bringing about Mackay's crossing point. And this is a shift away from privileged positioning of rationality, logic, empiricism. And what we're also talking about is movement and navigation, or what the writer Marco Fazzini called a walking and linguistic yoga, something contemporary men and women are in dire need of. In connecting our bodies and minds with those ancient wisdoms, memories, and biological networks, our internal landscapes coincide with our external ones, we're able to perceive, make meaning, express differently, but are different attuned to the expression of the earth. You'll see on this slide 3 pictures of shamans from African, Tibetan and Amazonian traditions, and I've put these here as markers for the shamanic aspect of this method. The shaman lives as part of a community and separate. They're the crossing point between the everyday and the fantastical. The processes involved across cultures and across time spaces are fundamentally concerned with heightened modes of awareness and consciousness, brought about by acute attention to the earthly. They speak to the rocks and they appreciate existence through animism and ancestry. Ancestry biologically, culturally, and the ancestry of the earth itself, where people make their homes and create places. They attend to heightened and alternative consciousness through their attention to harnessing the bodily and embodied wisdoms that I just spoke about: breath, movement, being and landscape. And in doing this, they attach themselves to their ancestral genius loci, the spirit of place, the manifestation of the cultural currents and the things, histories, communications that take place on those locales. Now, a fundamental aspect of geopoetics is about expressing and reconfiguring idiosyncratic perceptions of the locale, harnessing all of the senses and that which is verifiable alongside the sort of common and peculiar aspects of poetic insight. It's a reconditioning where we learn to reread landscape, perhaps like a pilgrim or a shaman might reread landscape, through retuned attention, movement, breath, trusting the body and the instincts as much as we do the logical mind. And we do that by walking. Walking itself brings about a particular flow-like state or a particular meditative state in the way that we need to concentrate on very simple movements and breath and direction. It puts us in that walking yogic position. But it's more than just travel in that sense. George Amar said that this is rereading, and this rereading is like swimming or dancing. And through this method, we can learn to read the land in the same way that Eskimos or nomads have done before us. We don't just visit, we don't just pass through, we inhabit. We become part of. We're not just somewhere, but we're within the earth itself. So using this astrolabe method, we reconnect the human and the more than human. We revitalise ancient wayfinding systems in us that are coded into our genetics and our DNA, becoming, as Amar says, man of the earth. And in doing this, we start to notice things that we hadn't noticed before, and we delve into the palimpsest of place, down into the layers, geologically speaking, culturally speaking, personally, historically, etc., etc. This is a geological observation at heart and a geological method, a remapping of that which is on our everyday through deep time, petrologic, stratigraphic alertness. The geopoet Francis Ponge said that the geopoet sinks into the night of Logos until finally they find themselves at the root level where things and formulations merge. So in reconfiguring the way that we use place, reconfiguring our movement through a locale, reconnecting with the earth in this astrolabe way, we go down into the layers of a place, both in terms of its cultural current and in terms of the topography and geology as well. And in sinking down into that, we reach the point where logos is found, where meaning making is found, where order springs forth out of chaos, where we find new ways and new methods of expressing earthness and being within that. This is something that's mirrored by the godfather of geopoetics, the Scottish writer Kenneth White. And he said that we need that the geopoet needs to be immediately placed in the enormous. And this is a deep time, cosmic, but earthbound state. He says, I've always been of the persuasion that the richest poetics came from contact with the earth, a plunge into biospheric space, from an attempt to read the lines of the world, a liberation from our conditioned minds. He says, once outside, you let things go, you let be. And crucially, he says that letting be or letting go isn't just a psychological thing, it's an ontological thing. Through this geopoetic method, we come into being in new ways. We revitalize the self and the way in which we perceive and experience landscape. So we come into being in new ways through this geopoetic method of conjugation, of bridging, of crossing points. And through this, Kenneth White says that we retrieve a topological presence. So sinking down into the night of Logos, entering the enormous, bringing about of topological presence is akin to the Romantics and their ideas of the sublime. The sublime is that astrolabe placing of an X that connects body, mind, landscape, terrestrial and heavenly. We're awe-stricken by our interconnectedness and our profound irrelevance. In climbing a mountain and reaching its summit, like Moses or Byron or Shelley, we're at the tip of the earth, on the edge of the heavens, and we're stricken by a strange amalgamation of terror and joy. This is quintessentially a sublime experience, the meeting place of terror and joy. We don't know how to fully conceive of it, and we certainly don't know how to best express it. This is an embodied wisdom, beyond logic, perhaps in some ways beyond language as we use it at the moment. Certainly rational language. Look at romantic paintings or poetry, and you'll notice that this sublime experience of awe is insight where the terrestrial and the tangible meet, and they meet the heavenly and the wondrous, a geopoetic crossing point. This is a kind of dramatic landscape in many ways as well, and by that I mean that it is a liminality or a marginal threshold position that allows for us to move between the everyday and the wondrous, the terrestrial and the heavenly. Which again links quite nicely back to ideas of crossing points and ideas of shamanic practices as well. So like the yogic, like the Shaolin or shamanic practices here, this sort of visionaryism has its feet firmly placed in the soil. It stands on the bedrock of a natural domain and has its rhizomatic roots in our most ancient biologies and our most ancient geological heritage as well. So not only are we talking about transcending planes and moving into new ways of looking at the world and thinking about this in terms of a shamanic visionaryism, it's important that these things are deeply rooted to a tangible, knowable, organic terrain. And we see this also play out in the late E.O. Wilson's biophilia. Biophilia, he says, is the innate tendency of us humans to focus on life and lifelike processes, and to find them beautiful and to feel connected to them. Human biology's evolved with its landscape. As we return to green spaces, so too do the processes and ecosystems that make up our bodies. We might find ourselves at a river or a stream, and inside of ourselves we say this is beautiful, but underpinning that sense of awe or beauty are biological cognitions, breath, body, neurology, nervous systems, and all of these are communicating with us and with each other, telling us, well done, you found water and food and cleanliness and shelter, and back to a natural position for our bodies. And this, as Wilson says, is a frontier literally at our fingertips, and one for which our spirit appears to have been explicitly designed. So getting back to the natural and green is a way in which we can bridge the poetic and or mystical with the rational and logical, bridge emotional feelings with bodily feelings. This is why we feel good when we're in green spaces and natural environments. And there's now huge amounts of cross-referenceable, peer-reviewed data to support the effect of green space on our physical, mental, and psychological well-being. The data is done, it's out. The earlier someone gets into nature and the longer that they spend there, the more profound the effects. And we feel this as much as we know it. It's in the smell of the earth, and it's in the sound of the stream or the memories and people that connect us to places, as much as it is in the bubbling feelings we get. But take that biophilic stance, employ that geopoetic crossing point, then it's the natural, organic, geological that underpins that sense of place identity as well. And again, another attaching of the grounded with the ephemeral, a terrestrial astrolabe. A way into the sublime in these ways is through the stones and through the bedrock of geology and into the land, the things that built our culture, the things on which our communities and societies and cultures are allowed to live, that give it life. It's the geology that underpins so much of that. What we see here are the things that connect us back to that ancient landscape and the landscapes of our ancestors, mammalian ancestors as much as species specific. But we also connect to the changes and the shifts of the earth that are millennia long, eons long, but are also always present and always on the edge of our everyday. Fellow geopoet Alison Hallett says that stones give her a sense of here and of here-ness, because when we hold a stone in our hand, we hold eons. And through this, Alison Hallett argues that we start to bring about the animal within us. So we're back to that kind of shamanic position. We start to see ourselves as uncivilized, mammalian, like that biophilic stance. And we start to see the body itself within a landscape as a site of meaning making, something that produces knowledge and wisdom. This again is shamanic animism, where we see the sublime, and it's seen in the meeting place of ground and cosmos, of being and landscape, of terror and joy. An example of this is from my own time spent as the poet in residence for the Black Country Geological Society. It can be seen in the images on these slides of Wren's Nest Nature Reserve. You can see on the image on the left the lush natural realm being circled by one of Dudley's housing estates. It's a site of protected insects, newts, plant life, but it's also full of industrial relics like mine shafts, train tracks, bell pits. The rocks that you see in these images are 428 million years old, dating back to the Silurian era, where Dudley was a tropical ocean bed. The image on the right is the famous wren's nest and ripple beds. This limestone outcrop and its strange patterning are the fossilized remains of ocean currents. So that which is fluid, constantly shifting, can't be held back, is locked in fossil time traps. This is deep time and this is slow time. And that push back into our ancient primal pasts, on the edge of domestic sphere, mixed in with the post-industrial relics, that which is always on our everydays. This is a feeling that we get, which is akin to staring at the stars, a sublime, awe-stricken experience. And again, a terrestrial astrolabe, connecting the solid with the ephemeral, the past with the present, every day with the wondrous. And I want to finish with an observation that I've made over the last 2 years of examining and revitalizing my awareness with my homelands and approaching landscape in a geological, geopoetic frame. Geology puts us in touch with the earth and the space-time which is as old as she is, and that provides embodied wayfinding wisdom of our locale and reopens a primeval animal consciousness and self-awareness. Just like the ancestral genius loci present in the rocks and the soils, the ancestral beasts woken within us in our new wayfinding say, I am in all. Thanks very much for listening. I really hope you enjoy this. I welcome any comments in the sections below. If you've enjoyed it, please consider supporting me through Buy Me a Coffee, Ko-Fi, or on PayPal. The links are in the description. This research was enabled by the University of Wolverhampton's Doctoral College and their Early Research Award Scheme, and features in my upcoming book, which is out in March 2023, called The Chain Coral Chorus, and that's out with Play Dead Press. Thank you very much.